In a city known for its quiet streets and polished image, one night shattered the illusion of safety. A brazen robbery shook the heart of Westbridge, leaving behind broken glass, stolen gold, and a community scarred with fear. This is not just the story of a crime. It's the story of people, of resilience, of fear and hope, of justice and redemption. Over the next 5 chapters, we will unravel how a single night of violence tested a city's spirit and how ordinary lives became part of an extraordinary fight for truth. Part 1. Shadows over Westbridge. The city of Westbridge wore its safety like a badge of honor. Reporters had called it the Fortress of Suburbia, a place where crime rates dipped so low that residents boasted of unlocked doors and children who played until twilight without fear. It was, in the eyes of its citizens, a city immune to the chaos that plagued the rest of America. But safety, like glass, can shatter in an instant. The jewelry store on Willow Avenue was called Kim Hung Jewelers. Its green awning sagged from years of California sun, its golden lettering chipped but proud. For decades, it had been more than a business. It was an anchor for the Vietnamese community of Westbridge. Families bought engagement rings there, mothers tucked away bracelets as heirlooms, and the elderly owner, Mr. Tran, became something of a local legend, a man who had survived war, exile, and the grind of the immigrant dream. On that Saturday morning, the streets were ordinary. A bakery down the block was pulling out trays of steaming baguettes. A teenager was tuning his car stereo in the parking lot. Life had its rhythm, predictable and calm. At 10:13 a.m., that rhythm was broken. A black SUV barreled down Willow Avenue, its engine growling like a predator. Witnesses would later swear it didn't slow down as it leapt the curb and smashed through the storefront of Kim Hung Jewelers. Glass exploded outward in a spray of diamonds and dust. Inside, chaos unfolded with military precision. Security cameras captured it all. 5 figures in black, masked and armored, spilled out of the SUV like shadows. They moved fast, too fast. Each carried a weapon, sledgehammers, axes, one unmistakably holding a handgun. "Down on the ground," one shouted, voice muffled through fabric. The young clerk near the register dropped instantly, hands trembling as she covered her head. Another employee froze, back pressed against the wall, eyes wide open in horror. And then there was Mr. Tran. At 88, his frame was fragile, but his spirit was not. He stood behind the counter, gripping it as if his hands alone could keep the chaos out. When one of the thieves swung a hammer into a display case, shattering it into fragments, Mr. Tran shouted something. His voice cracked, pleading, demanding. The man with the handgun turned toward him. A shove, brutal and deliberate, sent the old man crashing to the floor. He hit the tiles with a sickening thud, his glasses skidding across the room. The thieves didn't pause. They worked like machines, smashing cases, sweeping gold and diamonds into black duffel bags. Their movements were timed, efficient, practiced, as if they'd rehearsed this moment. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. The thieves poured back into the SUV, tires screeched against asphalt as the vehicle vanished into the late morning traffic, leaving only the echo of shattered glass and the whimper of the terrified clerk. On the floor, Mr. Tran struggled to sit up. His breath rattled. His employees rushed to his side, their faces pale with shock. Around them, the store was unrecognizable. Cases gutted, glass crunched underfoot, displays overturned like corpses of a battle lost. Outside, bystanders gathered. Some filmed with their phones, their voices urgent and shaky. Others called 911, their words tangled in panic. Within minutes, the wail of sirens cut through the air, and Westbridge police arrived to a scene that seemed torn from another city entirely. Detective Elena Ramirez was among the first through the door. A veteran of the Westbridge Police Department, she had cut her teeth on gang violence cases in Los Angeles before transferring north in search of quieter work. But as she stepped over broken glass into the gutted store, her instincts told her this wasn't just another smash and grab. Her eyes swept the room. The angle of the car's entry, the coordinated strikes on display cases, the precision of their timing, it all spoke of organization. These weren't desperate amateurs chasing quick cash. This was something colder, more calculated. She knelt beside Mr. Tran, who winced as paramedics examined him. His face, worn with age, was a mask of both pain and fury. "They took everything," he whispered in broken English, clutching at her sleeve. "Everything." Detective Ramirez nodded, her jaw tight. "We'll find them, sir, I promise." But promises were dangerous in Westbridge now. Within hours, the footage hit local news stations. The city's residents, accustomed to statistics that painted Westbridge as a fortress, watched the video in disbelief. A car smashing through a storefront, masked men pouring in like phantoms, an elderly man shoved to the floor. It looped on every television, every phone, feeding outrage and fear in equal measure. By evening, Mayor Richard Halloran faced reporters, his face flush with anger. "This city has prided itself on safety. What we saw today was an act of pure violence. These individuals will face justice, and they will face it swiftly." But behind the mayor's tough words, questions swirled. How had a city so confident in its safety become the stage for such a brazen heist? Who were these masked figures, so coordinated and fearless? And why target Kim Hung Jewelers, a small family-owned shop, rather than one of the glittering chains downtown? Detective Ramirez replayed the footage again and again late that night in her office. She noted the precision of the entry, the angle of the sledgehammers, the timing between each strike. To her trained eye, it looked less like a robbery and more like a choreography, an operation with a director somewhere in the shadows. And there was something else. At the 12-second mark of the footage, just before one robber shoved Mr. Tran, a gloved hand brushed against his shoulder. For a fraction of a second, the man hesitated, an odd flicker in an otherwise mechanical performance. Compassion? Recognition? Or something more sinister? Ramirez leaned closer to the screen, pausing the frame. The mask left nothing visible but eyes, cold, hard, and strangely familiar. The detective's pulse quickened. Westbridge had always promised safety, but as the pieces of the puzzle scattered before her, Ramirez realized the truth. Safety was an illusion, and illusions once shattered leave behind only sharp edges. The hunt had begun. Part 2. Echoes in the Glass. Detective Elena Ramirez didn't sleep much that night. Cases had a way of doing that. Some left her drained but detached. Others wormed under her skin and refused to let go. The robbery at Kim Hung Jewelers was the latter. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the old man collapsing to the floor, the shadows swarming around him, and those eyes, those cold, sharp eyes behind the mask. By morning, her office at the Westbridge Police Department looked like a crime drama in progress. Screens replayed the footage from every angle. Evidence bags lined her desk, shards of glass, fragments of the SUV's bumper, dustings of fingerprints lifted from the wreckage. Westbridge had never faced a case like this. Most of the department's work revolved around small-time drug busts, domestic disturbances, the occasional stolen car. But this was something different. This was theatrical. Captain Howard, her superior, stepped into her office with a coffee cup in hand. His bulk filled the doorway. "Elena," he said, "the mayor's already breathing down my neck. Halloran wants arrests yesterday. He's calling this a test of our city's reputation." Ramirez rubbed her temples. This wasn't a random job. They moved like professionals. You saw the footage. Their timing was perfect. Whoever's behind this has done it before. Howard frowned. "You think this crew's hit elsewhere?" "Not here, but maybe in other cities. Smash and grabs like this aren't new, but the level of coordination is off the charts." Howard sighed. "Then find me a chart to put it on before the mayor does it himself." By midday, Ramirez was at the crime scene again, walking slowly through the gutted store. The air still smelled faintly of gunpowder and dust. Workers swept glass into bins, each clink echoing like a reminder of broken promises. Mr. Tran sat in the chair near the back, a blanket draped over his shoulders. His family surrounded him, his daughter, middle-aged, fiercely protective, her hand resting on his. His eyes were tired, but sharp when they lifted to meet Ramirez's. "They thought I was weak," he said softly, his accent thick and voice trembling with anger more than fear. Ramirez crouched to his level. "You survived war, didn't you?" His daughter looked startled at the question, but Mr. Tran gave a small nod. "Vietnam. I lost more there than they could ever steal." That steel in his voice stayed with Ramirez. This wasn't just about jewelry. For Mr. Tran, the theft had torn open something deeper. Dignity, legacy, perhaps even pride. "Mr. Tran," Ramirez said, carefully, "did you notice anything about them? Anything unusual? Accents, words, anything?" He closed his eyes, replaying it in his mind. "One of them, when he pushed me down, he said, 'Stay down, old man.' Not like the others. His voice, young, American, not foreign." Ramirez nodded, filing it away. Sometimes the smallest cracks revealed the biggest truths. Across town, the community was already stirring. In the Vietnamese enclave near Oakwood Plaza, word spread fast. Shop owners huddled outside grocery stores, voices tense, anger simmering. The robbery wasn't just an attack on Mr. Tran, it felt like an attack on them all. At a small cafe, Ramirez met with Ling Nguyen, a community organizer who often acted as a bridge between Westbridge's Vietnamese residents and city officials. Ling was in her 30s, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, her phone buzzing non-stop as she fielded messages from worried locals. "They're scared," Ling told Ramirez. "This city promised us safety. We believed it. Now people think we've been lied to." Ramirez sipped the bitter coffee Ling had pushed across the table. "Fear is what these guys want. If people are afraid, they'll stay quiet. And quiet communities are easy targets." Ling leaned closer. "You think they'll strike again?" "I think," Ramirez said slowly, "that this wasn't about jewelry. At least not only about jewelry. Someone wanted to make a statement." Ling's brow furrowed. "What kind of statement?" Ramirez didn't answer. Not yet. Back at headquarters, forensics came through with the lead. The SUV used in the robbery had been stolen 3 days earlier from a lot outside Sacramento. The plates were switched, no prints. Whoever pulled this job knew how to erase their trail. But one thing slipped through. In the shards of glass near the register, technicians found a tiny scrap of fabric, black, synthetic, torn from one of the intruder's sleeves. On it was faint but legible, a logo, a manufacturer's mark used in custom tactical gear. Ramirez's pulse quickened. Not military issue, but close. Whoever outfitted this crew didn't shop at the local mall. She called Howard immediately. "Captain, we've got a thread. Pull it, and pull hard." That evening, Ramirez drove home through the streets of Westbridge. Neon lights flickered over quiet strip malls. Families sat in restaurant windows pretending things were normal. But she saw the unease, the way heads turned at every screech of tires, the way conversations hushed when police cruisers passed. She thought about the robber who shoved Mr. Tran, the hesitation in that gloved hand, the eyes that lingered just a second too long. Somewhere out there, 5 men were counting their haul, convinced they were untouchable. But Ramirez knew better. Criminals always left traces. Always. She parked outside her apartment and sat in the dark car, staring at the city skyline. Westbridge was supposed to be safe. Now, it was her crime scene. And the deeper she dug, the more certain she became. This wasn't just the work of thieves. It was the opening move of something bigger. The glass was only the beginning. Part 3: Fractures and Bonds. The days after the robbery felt heavy in Westbridge. The city still carried its bright facade. Families filled the parks, cafes hummed with chatter, and children rolled their bikes down quiet streets. But under that surface ran a current of unease. People locked their doors earlier. Strangers were watched with suspicion. And in the Vietnamese enclave of Oakwood Plaza, the robbery at Kim Hung Jewelers had become the only topic of conversation. For many, Mr. Tran was more than a shop owner. He was a symbol. To those who fled Vietnam decades ago, he represented resilience, the kind of man who built something from nothing in a foreign land. Seeing him shoved to the ground by faceless thieves cut deeper than glass. It wasn't just an attack on his store, it felt like an assault on their dignity. 3 days after the incident, a candlelight vigil formed outside the shattered storefront. The green awning of Kim Hung Jewelers sagged lower than ever, its letters cracked, its windows boarded up with plywood. But in front of it, hundreds gathered. Old women in patterned scarves clutched rosaries. Young children held candles, their small flames trembling in the evening breeze. Men carried posters scrawled with messages: "Justice for Mr. Tran. Keep Westbridge safe." Mr. Tran himself sat in a wheelchair near the center, a blanket over his knees. His daughter stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. The crowd fell into silence as he raised his frail hand. His voice was thin, but it carried. "They wanted to take from me, but they cannot take our spirit. We are still here. We will not live in fear." The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, then applause, cautious but real. For a moment, the fear that had hung over the community like smoke seemed to lift. Detective Ramirez stood on the edge of the crowd, watching. She wasn't in uniform. Tonight, she was there not as a cop, but as a witness to the human cost of the crime. She noticed how people pressed closer to each other, how neighbors who rarely spoke now shared food, lit candles side by side, held each other's hands. In the cracks left by violence, community was blooming. But not everyone found comforts in the gathering. Inside the cafe across the street, 2 young men sat watching the vigil through the window. One, barely 20, tapped his foot nervously. What's the point? Candles don't stop guys with guns. The other, older by a few years, leaned back in his chair. It's not about stopping them, it's about showing we're not scared. The younger man scoffed. I am scared. My mom told me not to close the shop late anymore. She said, if they hit Kim Hung, they can hit anyone. She's right. The older one didn't answer immediately. He stared at Mr. Tran in the wheelchair, surrounded by people. Finally, he said, That man survived war. He's still here, still standing. Maybe we owe him more than just fear." The younger man looked back at the vigil, his expression torn. At the community center the following week, Lin Nguyen organized a meeting. The room was filled with shopkeepers, parents, and elders. Detective Ramirez was there too, listening as people voiced their fears. "We need more police, more patrols. Cops can't be everywhere. We need cameras, alarms, metal bars, like back home." "Back home," an elderly man muttered bitterly. "We left all that behind. We came here because we believed it was safe." Voices overlapped, frustration spilling over. Some demanded stronger punishment. Others called for community patrols. Ramirez waited until the noise ebbed before she spoke. "I understand your fear. What happened to Mr. Tran should never have happened. But safety isn't just about police or cameras. It's about each other. Look around this room. You're stronger together than apart." Her words didn't erase the fear, but they planted something else, a seed of resolute. That night, Mr. Tran's granddaughter Anna, only 12 years old, sat at the kitchen table with her homework untouched. She had seen the robbery footage on a classmate's phone. She had seen her grandfather shoved to the floor, his glasses flying off. The image haunted her dreams. Her mother tried to coax her. "Anna, sweetheart, you need to sleep." "I don't want to," Anna whispered. "What if they come back?" Her mother pulled her close, smoothing her hair. "We're safe here. We have family, neighbors, friends. You don't have to carry this fear alone." Anna looked up, her young face serious. "Grandpa didn't deserve that." "No," her mother agreed softly. "But he showed us something. Even when they tried to scare him, he stood up. That's what we carry forward." In her small way, Anna began to understand resilience. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving in spite of it. The robbery had left scars, but it also revealed something else. The invisible threads binding a community. People who had been strangers now exchanged phone numbers. Neighbors offered to walk each other home at night. Local businesses pulled money to repair Mr. Tran's storefront. In a city shaken by violence, humanity was quietly stitching itself back together. Detective Ramirez drove home from the meeting that night with a strange mix of emotions. Anger at the faceless thieves still roamed free, but also admiration for Mr. Tran, for Anna, for the hundreds who gathered with candles instead of weapons. She knew her job was to hunt the criminals, but tonight she realized something more. Her real fight was to protect the fragile thing the community was holding on to: hope. And that, she thought grimly, was worth more than all the gold in the shattered cases of Kim Hung jewelers. Part 4. Cracks in the Mask. Detective Elena Ramirez studied the scrap of fabric under the harsh glow of the evidence room lights. The torn piece of tactical cloth, no bigger than a fingernail, bore a faint manufacturer's logo. Her team traced it to a custom supplier in Nevada, one that rarely sold to the public. It was a thread, thin but promising. She leaned back, exhaustion written across her face. Days had turned into a blur of interviews, dead-end tips, and endless video footage. Yet this sliver of fabric whispered that the robbers weren't untouchable ghosts. They were men, and men made mistakes. Meanwhile, across Westbridge, the community wasn't waiting idly for justice. The candlelight vigil had evolved into something more concrete. Shop owners formed a loose network, watch groups that shared suspicious activity through messaging apps, volunteers who escorted elders home after work, teens who offered to install security cameras for local stores at no charge. Mr. Tran's store, still boarded up, had become a symbol. Flowers and handwritten notes covered the plywood. Messages in both English and Vietnamese read, "We stand with you. Stay strong, Grandpa Tran." Detective Ramirez noticed the shift when she returned to Oakwood Plaza. Fear hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into defiance. People weren't shrinking. They were watching, learning, preparing. And that, she knew, could change everything. One evening, as Ramirez was reviewing license plate data, her phone buzzed. It was Lynn Nguyen. "There's something you need to see," Lynn said urgently. "A store owner thinks he spotted one of them." Within minutes, Ramirez was driving toward a small pawn shop on the edge of town. The owner, a wiry man with nervous eyes, explained that a customer had come in the day before, trying to offload a handful of gold bracelets. The pieces looked familiar, intricate Vietnamese designs that rarely appeared outside family-owned jewelers. "I didn't take them," the pawn shop owner said quickly. "I knew the heat around that robbery, but I remembered his face. Young, jittery, had a scar near his eyebrow." Ramirez's pulse quickened. This was their first real description. She pushed a photo lineup across the counter, built from past burglary suspects in the region. The man hesitated, then tapped one photo. "That's him, or damn close." The name beneath the photo was Caleb Riker, a 23-year-old drifter with a record of petty thefts and a brief stint with the gang in Sacramento. Not exactly the profile of a mastermind, but if he was desperate enough to pawn stolen jewelry so soon, he was sloppy enough to lead her to the others. That night, Ramirez briefed her captain. "This crew isn't just random. They've got organization, maybe backing. But Riker, he's the weak link. He's reckless. If we find him, we unravel the rest." Howard grunted. "The mayor wants results. If Riker's our way in, we take him down fast." But Ramirez shook her head. "Not fast, smart. If we spook him, he disappears. We need eyes on him. Let him think he's safe, then follow the trail back to the crew." Howard didn't like it. Politics demanded action, not patience. But Ramirez had solved enough cases to know rushing a fragile thread only made it snap. While detectives quietly spread their net, the community of Westbridge found its own strength. At a weekend market, volunteers collected donations to help Mr. Tran rebuild. Little kids brought dollar bills from their piggy banks. High school students organized a fundraiser concert. Even strangers outside the Vietnamese community pitched in, touched by the story of an 88-year-old who refused to be broken. Mr. Tran, still bruised but healing, insisted on attending. He stood at the microphone, hands trembling but voice steady. "They broke my glass. They stole my gold. But they cannot steal what we share here today. That is stronger than anything they carry in their bags." The applause that followed rolled like thunder. For Ramirez, watching from the back, it was a reminder. Justice wasn't only about arrest. It was also about giving people back the belief that they weren't helpless. 2 days later, surveillance teams picked up movement. Riker had been spotted at a rundown motel near the interstate. He came and went at odd hours, meeting with unfamiliar faces, always carrying the same black duffel bag. Ramirez joined the stakeout, binoculars trained on the peeling paint of the motel door. She thought of Mr. Tran, of Anna's frightened eyes, of the hundreds who lit candles in the night. This wasn't just another arrest. It was the first crack in the mask. Part 5. The long night ends. The motel raid began just before dawn. Detective Elena Ramirez crouched behind a patrol car, headset buzzing with quiet chatter. The Westbridge Police Department had the place surrounded. Officers in tactical gear waited in the shadows, rifles steady, breath misting in the cool air. Inside, their suspect slept, or so they hoped. "Unit Bravo on my signal," Ramirez whispered into her mic. Her eyes never left the peeling green door of room 12. That door was the threshold between weeks of frustration and the first real chance at justice. At 5:04 a.m., the door creaked open. Caleb Riker stumbled out, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, eyes bleary. He didn't even look up until the first shout split the air. "Police! On the ground!" Panic flared in his face. Riker bolted. He didn't make it 10 feet before 2 officers pinned him to the asphalt. The duffel bag burst open, spilling a cascade of gold chains, jade pendants, and rings that glittered in the flashing red-blue lights. For the first time since the robbery, Ramirez allowed herself a breath of relief. They had him. But Riker wasn't the prize. He was the key. In the interrogation room, he folded quickly. The tough facade of a street hustler melted under the weight of evidence and the cold steel of reality. Sweat soaked through his shirt as he confessed he hadn't planned the robbery. He was recruited. "It was Knox," Riker muttered, eyes darting. "Damien Knox. He runs a crew out of Oakland. I needed cash. They said it'd be easy money." Ramirez leaned in. "And where is Knox now?" Riker swallowed hard. "Planning the next hit. Another jewelry store. Tonight." By nightfall, Westbridge police prepared for the showdown. Intelligence confirmed Knox and 3 others were holed up in an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront, the kind of place where shadows swallowed everything whole. This time, Ramirez wasn't just chasing suspects. She was walking into a confrontation with men who had already terrorized her city once and planned to do it again. The raid team moved in silence, boots crunching against gravel. The warehouse loomed above them, broken windows like blackened eyes. Inside, voices echoed. Knox's voice carried, deep and commanding. "We hit the store fast, no hesitation, same as last time. Nobody fights back if you make them afraid." Ramirez signaled. Officers surged forward. "Police, don't move." Chaos erupted. Knox drew his gun, firing wildly. The air cracked with gunfire. Officers shouted. Splinters flew from shattered crates. Ramirez dove for cover, heart hammering. She caught sight of Knox, the scarred leader, slipping toward a side exit. Without thinking, she sprinted after him. The chase spilled into the night, boots slamming pavement, lungs burning. Knox leapt fences, ducked alleys, desperate to vanish into the city. But Ramirez was faster. At the edge of the waterfront, Knox stumbled, cornered by chain-link fencing. He turned, gun raised, fury in his eyes. "It's over, Knox," Ramirez shouted, weapon steady. "Drop it!" For a heartbeat, the world froze. 2 lives balanced on a trigger pull. Knox's eyes flickered. Rage, fear, resignation. Then, with a guttural curse, he tossed the gun into the water and dropped to his knees. The long night was finally over. The aftermath rippled through Westbridge. News of the arrests spread quickly. Riker and Knox's entire crew dismantled before they could strike again. For the first time in weeks, people walked through Oakwood Plaza with their shoulders a little straighter. At the reopened jewelry store, Mr. Tran returned behind the counter. His hands still trembled when he handled gold bangles, but his spirit had hardened like tempered steel. A new glass door gleamed where the old one had shattered. On the front, his granddaughter had taped a sign, "We're still here." The community cheered his return. Customers lined up not just to buy jewelry, but to show him he wasn't alone. At City Hall, Mayor Lucas Reed spoke to the press. His words were firm, but his eyes betrayed relief. He said, "Westbridge will never tolerate fear ruling our streets. Thanks to the tireless work of our police and the strength of our community, justice has prevailed." But it wasn't the mayor's speech people remembered. It was what Mr. Tran said later at a neighborhood gathering. "They thought breaking my store would break us. But instead, it brought us together. The gold they stole was precious, yes. But the bond we share, that is treasure they can never take." For Ramirez, the case left scars. Nights of sleepless waiting, the flash of a gun at the waterfront, the weight of knowing how close fear had come to swallowing her city. But it also left her with something else. The sight of candles glowing on sidewalks, of strangers protecting each other, of a community stronger than crime. As she drove home one evening, the city lights of Westbridge shimmered against the dark sky. Safe? No city ever truly was. But resilient? Absolutely. And resilience, she knew, was the truest kind of safety. The story of the Westbridge jewelry heist is more than a tale of crime and punishment. It is the story of a community standing tall against fear, of a store owner who refused to give up, of neighbors who turned pain into unity, and of a city that learned safety isn't the absence of danger, it's the presence of resilience. In the end, gold may glitter, but it is courage, compassion, and connection that shine the brightest. At LaLa Family, we believe that every story of family, whether it's about joy, struggle, loss, or new beginnings, has the power to connect us. Life is messy and unpredictable, but it's also filled with love, resilience, and moments worth sharing. That's why we've built this channel, to bring you powerful, heart-touching stories that remind us we're never truly alone. If you've ever faced hardship, if you've ever felt the weight of parenthood, or if you simply believe in the strength of love and community, this channel is for you. Our videos aren't just stories. They're windows into real human experiences that inspire hope, courage, and empathy. But we can't grow this community without you. By clicking subscribe, you're not just following a channel, you're joining a family. Every like helps us reach more people who may need to hear these stories right now. And every share spreads the message that even in the darkest times, there is always light to be found. So if these stories move you, if they make you think, or if they touch your heart even a little, don't just watch, take action. Hit that subscribe button, tap the like button, and share our videos with friends and loved ones. Together, we can build a community where stories heal, inspire, and bring people closer. Welcome to LaLa Family, where love, resilience, and hope live on.